One of my most requested videos is how do I prepare for a tournament? I'm going to go to my first event. What do I need to do? What are the kind of things that I need to think about? And how am I best going to prepare in order to do well? So today that's what we are going to talk about. But this isn't going to be your kind of, oh, here are the things that you need for your event video where I say, don't forget your tape measure, don't forget your dice, all of that rubbish. I'm going to go through my process that I go through when looking to prepare for an event. I'm going to go through my list building choices, how I write my list for that event, how I break down the missions, and we're going to go into a little bit of in-depth about what you can do as a player before an event even starts to try and maximize your chances of doing well and trying to win that event itself. Okay, everybody, we did it. We absolutely smashed it last year. We hit that 3,000 subscriber goal. Let's do it again this year. We're going for 5K. All you need to do is like and subscribe. And in fact, no, you don't need to subscribe. What I would like you to do now, after you finish watching this video, I've got a massive playlist of all sorts of things Warcry. Check out one of those videos and see if that's what you like. But if you want to throw some more support my way, you can join me here as a member. You can join me over on Patreon. You can join my Discord. Links for that are going to be down in the description below. Either way, you get to see stuff before it's released. You get to have a say into the kind of content that I create in the future. That's it from me for now. Let's get back to the video. Right, before I want to start, I think the biggest thing I want to get out of the way is ask the question, what do you want to get out of your event? Are you going there specifically because you want to go and win? You want to go and win all your games? You want to try and top the event itself? Are you going there just to have some fun? You just want to play some Warcry and generally have a good time about it? Are you going there to test new builds? What are you going to do? Why do you want to go there? And that's really going to shape your mindset for all the things that we're about to be talking about. Personally, I like to go to events. Well, I go to events mainly because it's pretty much the only place I can actually play in real life Warcry nowadays. You know, time constraints, they kind of get the better of you. You got family at home, you don't really have all the time in the world to go and play Warcry. So that's why I go to events, because it allows me to get away and to do that part of the hobby. The kind of lists that I like to bring to events aren't necessarily going to be the same kind of lists that other people would like to bring. I've got a very specific play style that I like to play, and for the most part, that doesn't really gel with the kind of top tier, here are the best lists that are topping events elsewhere in the world. So I try and build the best lists for me and for my play style, and I take those to events and see how they do and to see how they go. Your mileage may vary on this, so really it's up to you. If you just want to go there, play some games, have a good time, that's up to you. Fantastic. Most events that I have been to, the kind of split between different kinds of players, you'll get normally around about 20% of those players are going to be those guys who are looking to go there and win the event. And then you'll get another probably half of the players who are just going there to have a good time. Maybe they got a one-box warband, maybe they got a collection of models that they put together, and that's what they want to play with. And the rest of them will usually just be very casual one-box guys. That's fine. The event itself is what you make of it, and you get out of it what you put into it. First thing I'm going to talk about, though, is list building. You've seen this graphic before, but I'm going to go over it very quickly. The idea is, with list building philosophy, you can either build top down or bottom up. If you're building top down, you decide how you want your warband to play, and if you're building bottom up, you pick one or two fighters or one or two abilities that you want to focus on, and then you build the rest of the warband around those fighters to kind of try and flesh it out into some kind of coherent thing. You'll have a whole bunch of considerations. You'll have things like your favorite miniatures. You'll have things like the missions. The missions are very important when we're looking at an event. That's something we're going to be taking a look at in a little bit. You're talking about faction choice. If you're playing competitively or casually, the kind of terrain that you're going to see. If you're going to see a lot of verticality and a lot of very dense terrain, then it's very unlikely that you're going to bring something like a zombie dragon, for example, with its very large base. It can't fit places, so you'll have a much harder time using it. And then finally, there might be additional list building constraints that the TOs and the tournament organizers might put on you. So for example, they might say no monsters, they might say no fighters above a certain points level, they might say no allies, no whatever. So these are the things that you will bear in mind, but most players are going to fall somewhere somewhere on this spectrum as to how they write their lists and how they go about really deciding what they're going to bring. If we're talking about list building, there are a number of successful archetypes, different kinds of lists and different shapes of lists that have done very well in events so far. And so when you're building your list, that might be something that you might want to take into account. This, I would be very happy to direct everybody over to Dan at the Salty Sea. He went through this in depth in one of his videos. I'm going to put the link up there, put the link down there, wherever it's going to go. This is kind of a flyby show, but I think what he identified and what he's looked at by doing an analysis of all the different kinds of lists at top events, I think it's very valid, and I think it's very interesting and very important. If you are looking to be one of those players who wants to do a little bit better in your games, I'm not necessarily saying, oh, if you want to win an event, your list has to look like this, but these are some of the successful shapes of lists and successful types of lists that you might want to think about when you're writing your own. Within your faction, when you pick it, even if you just pick it because you like the models, think about the different kind of warband that you can build. And even if it's something simple like 2 really big fighters and a bunch of chaff, if you can build that within your faction or with a couple of allies, then generally speaking, you should be able to have a good time. So there are a few different kinds of lists here. We've got activation DOMs. By the way, none of these are mine. Dan set these headings, so don't blame me. Activation DOMs, basically horde warbands, swarm warbands. It's going to be characterized by cheap bodies and some kind of mechanic that you can take advantage of activating last. Maybe it's resurrect on objective missions. You're able to put stuff onto the field after your opponent has activated that you can bring back and they can go and capture objectives. Or there might be different abilities like kill from Archetype hunters or pack tactics like Royal Beast Flayers that allows you to do a whole bunch of point and click damage after you've maneuvered all of your stuff. Different warbands that can work very well in this space are things like Dispossessed, Soulblight Gravelords, Beast Flayers that we've already talked about, Monster Killers with their Egg Grots, the Wildercorp dogs list, so a lot of dogs and a bunch of dog lords, and of course I did well with it, Tarantulas Brood, because they can bring guys back to life and they get a whole bunch of free activations. Next, we have Wilder Guns, which is your kind of classically shooty warband. So what you're going to be looking at doing is basically taking the best shooter in your list and is spamming out a whole bunch of that. This was basically named after the Wildercorp Hunters crossbow list, so as many crossbows as you can get. Trailblazers with double crossbows, they're fantastic. You can play this with Wonderful Hunters, of course. Hunters of Wanchi, Karajan Overlords also can do this very well. You might want to include some of the more unique pieces, so things like the Arbalister if we're talking about Wondercorp Hunters, or something like the Aether Cannon if we're talking about Karajan Overlords. And then your game style will change a little bit. You'll really be looking to waste actions with your cheaper fighters, and then that will allow your big super shooty pieces to basically snipe whatever they want. Things like the Slan Starmaster fit into this. Things like Quiet Pock also fits into this. And then we have a bunch of warbands that kind of loosely look the same. I say very loosely because kind of they all play a little bit differently, but ideally what you're going to be having is 2 very big threats and a bunch of chaff to support them. This is historically called talls and smalls, where you have your big guys and you have your little guys. There are a whole bunch of warbands that can do this successfully. You've got Destruction Soup. If you manage to get a Rampage turn 2 or 3 with any of these very large big heroes, they will basically mow over things. And then you've got extremely high utility chaff. It might be things like Egg Grots. It might be things out of Warhammer Underworlds that give you nets or give you bonus abilities or bonus actions. That's the kind of things that we are talking about. Similarly, you can do that style of list with Vexmore. So you're going to run Vexmore, something big and smashy. So let's say a Varangard, and then a whole bunch of cheap chaff. There is space in that kind of list for utility heroes. Cyberites, Demons of Nurgle, and Slaves of Darkness can do this very well. And then finally, we have Skaven. They're going to be working around their battle trait to bring back things that cost 70 points or less, and the new very good, very efficient Rat Ogres. That list is going to look something like 1 to 2 Rat Ogres, probably 1 Packmaster, and then 2 or more 70-point chaff fighters so that you can really take advantage of that battle trait. You can then add in any other heroes and any other tech that you want. Sometimes it's going to be Skavic. It might be Spikeclaw's Swarm and his guys if you want some Resurrect in there. Next up, the most important thing, and I think this is the most important thing when you are looking to build your list for an event and to do well in that event is building for the actual mission pack that you are going to see. In most events, the mission pack that you are playing is published in advance. You will know a selection of missions, maybe a selection of 6 missions, and 4 of those, if it's a 4-round event, will be the ones that will be chosen for you guys to play. It's important to mention that not all missions are going to be created equal. Different mission packs are going to have different list building requirements. We're going to take a look at some of that in a moment here. So you have to think about what you're going to be taking and what roles you're going to be assigning to each of your fighters. So for example, if you are going to run into treasure missions, you're going to need some kinds of fighters to act as treasure missions and caddies to support those fighters. If you are running into heavy objectives, you're going to need a lot of numbers of your own to go and get those objectives. You're going to be needing fast pieces to go and get far-reaching objectives and slow down your opponents. And if it's a kill mission, you're going to need something big and smashy to go in there to get the kills and to actually score the points. I do want to say that in most tournaments and most events that I've been to, deployment groups are decided before the game starts, and because you will know the missions that you'll be playing in advance, you'll be able to look at that tournament pack and say, okay, here are the deployments and here are all of the missions and all of the objectives. You'll be able to break down that mission pack. You'll have to think about what kinds of fighters you're going to put in your dagger, your hammer, and your shield to maximize their effectiveness, regardless where they come on in any of those missions that you are likely to play. Looking at the tournament packs and how we do this, I've got a selection of a couple for you. I do want to say that Rob and his boys over at 3H1C, they did a very good breakdown of how to look at tournament packs, how to break down the missions, the different kinds of things that you want to bring. Again, I'm going to put that link up there, down there, wherever it's going to go. Go and check that out because it's kind of fascinating. And if you want to go really in depth, that's the video that you want to watch. But for us here, just this is for illustration's sake. I've looked at 2 of the official tournament packs that Games Workshop have actually put out. We've got the Nullwood Rumble pack, which was very much designed for like after-school league style things, where you could get a game done in an hour. You could play 3 games over the course of an evening. And then we've got the Tangled Nullwood pack, which is the one that's currently favored at Warhammer World. We played it a whole bunch of times. It's well-trodden ground by now. So this is what I do when I'm looking at the missions and I'm looking at the pack itself to decide what's going to go into my dagger, hammer, and my shield, and really to shape the different kinds of warbands and the different lists that I would want to bring. If we start with the Nullwood Rumble pack, you'll notice that there are a lot of multiple objective missions. You've got 3 missions that have 4 objectives, 2 missions that have 6, and then 1 mission that has treasure tokens, but those treasure tokens can be looted twice. So effectively, that has 6 objectives on there that you have to go and get. Turn 1 deployment is very important because you're only going to have either your dagger, your hammer, or your shield on the board turn 1, and then the other 2 will arrive on turn 2. Now, you don't know which of these missions that you will be playing, so you've kind of got to decide and you've kind of got to figure out what things are going to go where. So let's say, for example, let's take Supremacy and Tide of Battle, right? The 2 6 objective missions. You know that your dagger is going to be on the board on turn 1. You also know that your dagger is going to be on the board turn 1 for Loot and Pillage and for Spoils of War, all high objective missions. Loot and Pillage is going to have treasure tokens on there. So you might want to think to yourself, okay, maybe in my dagger, when I'm building my list, I want something very fast. Maybe we're talking about Dark Oath Riders, for example. Maybe we are talking about Knight of Shrouds on Ethereal Steed, something that can go out, go and capture those very far objectives. Maybe you want to think about loading your dagger and loading it up so that you have the most fighters in your dagger so that you can really take advantage of that turn 1 deployment. Let's say, for example, you are running a 10-man list. You get one of your deployments that has 4 fighters. Think about your dagger when you're looking at that and say, okay, maybe that's where I want to put my guys. Looking at the Tangled Nullwood, we've got the 6 missions there. Tangled Nullwood is a bit of a special case. It's got primaries and secondaries and then an additional twist, which is kind of like a backup mechanic. But if we look at the objectives themselves of each of these missions, we've got 3 objective missions and then 3 kill missions. The objective missions all have kill as their secondary, and then the kill missions all have objectives in some form or another as their secondary. Brutal Encounter has table quarters, but mostly they fall within that kind of shape. It's a bit different from the Nullwood Rumble pack, so we're going to have 2 deployment groups on the field on turn 1, but the ones that I've highlighted in red, if we take a look at the actual deployments themselves, The ones that I've highlighted in red are the deployments that are going to be furthest away from either the objectives or from your opponents, which means that you need to think about fast pieces to put into those deployments so that they can get into the fight quicker and really be able to influence the game. So if we're looking at Tie the Blades, Endless Struggle, Brutal Encounter, they are all kill missions, but the dagger, the hammer, and the shield in each one of those missions, depending on which one you play, is going to come on and it's going to be furthest away from the action. So when you are thinking about your list, if you have something like Vexmore, for example, you want to probably avoid putting it into your dagger in case something like Endless Struggle is going to come up, because Vexmore is very slow and he is very far away. You have to look at a combination of all of the deployments on all of the missions that you are likely to play, and then you can really decide what exactly is going to go where. It's a pretty even split in terms of dagger, hammer, shield if they're going to be on the board, but looking at this, we kind of decided that to make sure that your slower, maybe more damaging pieces are least impacted by this tournament pack, put them into your hammer, because that will allow them to be as close as they can to the action most of the time. And then you can think about how you load up your dagger and your shield when you come to doing the rest of the warband. Now, ideally, what you're going to be doing is you're going to be looking at whatever tournament pack it is that you're playing, and you can apply this logic to basically any of those packs, any of those missions, and you can say, right, I'm going to have 3 objective missions, 2 treasure missions, and a kill mission. So this is the kind of list that I'm going to build. You'll notice that for the Nullwood Rumble pack, because there are a lot of high objective missions, you're generally going to want to look at a much larger warband, probably minimum 10 models, because you need to go out and you need to go get those objectives. Similarly for the Tangled Nullwood pack, yes, there are kill missions, yes, there are objective missions, but you've got a 5 and a 4 in terms of objectives, and then you've got a 4 in your secondary. So you again want to be looking at slightly larger warbands. I'm not saying you need to go all the way up to 10, but probably something like 7, 8. I would say 8 is probably the sweet spot for this pack. So 8 will really give you the ability to take some very large, very chunky, just smashy pieces that will win you those kill missions, but still give you the numbers necessary to be able to win those objective missions and the secondaries on those kill missions.